A whale brings a shipwrecked boy to safety. What it does next will melt your heart. The sea was a roaring tempest, an orchestra of chaos conducted by the merciless hand of nature. Waves, as tall as buildings, crashed with the force of thunder, their icy spray biting into the skin of a lone boy, clinging to the remains of a shattered lifeboat. His name was Ethan, a 10-year-old with dreams of adventure now stranded in a nightmare. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the splintered wood, his body trembling not only from the cold, but from the suffocating weight of fear. The night sky offered no solace. It was as if the stars themselves had vanished, swallowed by the inky, black void above. Lightning forked across the heavens, illuminating the vast and unforgiving ocean for fleeting moments. In those flashes, Ethan caught glimpses of his isolation, the endless expanse of water surrounding him like a prison with no walls, no escape. Then a sound broke through the cacophony. It wasn't the crash of waves or the howl of the wind, but something deeper, more resonant. A low, mournful call echoed across the waters, vibrating through Ethan's bones. It was the song of a whale, long, haunting, and impossibly close. Ethan's breath hitched. Could it be real? Or was his mind, teetering on the edge of exhaustion, conjuring illusions of salvation? He squinted into the darkness, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Suddenly, another flash of lightning revealed a massive silhouette, rising from the depths. The whale was enormous, its sleek body shimmering like obsidian in the fleeting light. It breached the surface with a grace that defied its size, sending a spray of water into the air that glittered like diamonds. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The boy and the whale locked eyes, one filled with desperation, the other with an inexplicable depth of understanding. But this was no ordinary whale. Its presence carried an almost otherworldly calm amidst the storm's chaos. It circled Ethan's makeshift raft with deliberate movements, as though assessing his fragile state. With a final mournful cry, the whale dove beneath the waves, leaving Ethan alone once more. "No!" Ethan croaked, his voice hoarse from the salt water he'd swallowed. Panic clawed at his chest. Was it abandoning him? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, until he felt a sudden jolt beneath him. The raft shifted, tilting precariously, and Ethan's heart stopped. Then he realized the truth. The whale had returned, lifting the remains of the lifeboat on its broad, powerful back. It wasn't abandoning him, it was carrying him. Tears streamed down Ethan's face, mingling with the ocean's spray. His fingers dug into the wood as the whale began to glide through the storm, cutting through the waves with an ease that seemed almost magical. Each movement was purposeful, protective, as though the creature had taken the boy's survival into its own hands, or rather its fins. The storm's fury raged on, but within the whale's embrace, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in hours, he wasn't fighting alone. The rhythmic rise and fall of the whale's movements beneath him brought a strange comfort, a reassurance that defied logic. But as the night stretched on, a nagging question began to surface. In Ethan's mind, why? Why would such a magnificent wild creature go to such lengths to save him? The answer, it seemed, lay ahead, beyond the horizon where the storm still raged. Little did Ethan know, this extraordinary act of compassion was only the beginning. What the whale would do next, a choice driven by instinct, love, or perhaps something greater, would not only save a life, but change the way the world understood. The bond between humans and the mysterious giants of the deep. And so boy and beast ventured into the unknown, their fates intertwined by the vast, unyielding ocean, and a story that would melt the hardest of hearts. Ethan's relief was short-lived. As the storm grew fiercer, its winds howling like a wild beast, determined to tear apart everything in its path. Sheets of rain lashed at his face, and the icy water soaked through his clothes, chilling him to the bone. The whale beneath him surged forward with strength and purpose, navigating the chaos of the sea with an instinct that seemed almost supernatural. But the ocean was relentless, throwing one challenge after another. A monstrous wave loomed ahead, its crest towering like a watery mountain. Ethan's grip on the raft tightened, his nails digging into the splintered wood as terror gripped him. The whale dove, plunging into the dark depths to avoid the waves. Devastating force. Ethan's breath caught as he was momentarily submerged. The freezing water enveloped him, stealing the air from his lungs. He clung desperately to the raft, his body battered by the current. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the whale broke the surface again, lifting Ethan back into the storm's fury. The boy gasped for air, coughing violently. His heart raced, his mind consumed with the primal need to survive. Yet, through the haze of fear, he felt an odd sense of trust in his mysterious savior. The whale's movements were deliberate, almost protective, as if it understood the fragility of the life it carried. The storm's wrath seemed unending, each wave a fresh assault. Ethan's hands burned from gripping the raft, his muscles trembling. With exhaustion, his thoughts drifted to home, to the warm embrace of his mother, the smell of his favorite cookies baking in the oven, and the sound of his father's laughter echoing through the house. The memories were a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting him to a world that felt impossibly far away. Another wave crashed over them, and Ethan screamed as the raft bucked violently. He was thrown sideways, his small frame dangling precariously. Over the edge, the whale reacted instantly, tilting its body to steady the boy's precarious position. Ethan scrambled back onto the raft, his chest heaving with sobs. "I can't do this," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I can't." But the whale seemed to think otherwise. It let out a deep, resonant call that cut through the chaos, a sound that filled Ethan's chest with something he hadn't felt in hours: courage. The storm began to show signs of relenting, the winds losing their brutal edge and the waves growing less formidable. Ethan dared to hope, his exhausted body sagging against the raft. The whale pressed onward, its powerful tail slicing through the water with tireless determination. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, painting the sky with hues of gold and pink. The ocean, once a raging tempest, now shimmered like a vast, tranquil mirror. Ethan squinted against the light, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of land. Then he saw it, a jagged silhouette rising from the water, its rocky cliffs a stark contrast against the morning sky. Land. The word filled Ethan with a surge of energy, a desperate hope that coursed through his veins. The whale slowed, its movements becoming more deliberate as it approached the shore. Ethan's heart pounded as he realized the significance of what was happening. The creature wasn't just a savior. It was a guide, leading him to safety with an intelligence that defied explanation. The raft scraped against the rocks as they reached the shallows. Ethan hesitated, his legs weak and unsteady as he prepared to disembark. He turned to the whale, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. The whale let out a final haunting call, its massive eye gazing at Ethan with a depth of understanding that sent chills down his spine. Then, with a powerful flick of its tail, it turned back toward the open sea, disappearing beneath the waves. Ethan stumbled onto the rocky shore, his knees buckling beneath him. He collapsed onto the sand, his body racked with sobs of relief and gratitude. But his ordeal was far from over. As he looked around, he realized the island was desolate, a barren stretch of land with no signs of human life. And yet, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the whale had brought him here for a reason. The answer lay somewhere on this island, hidden among the jagged rocks and windswept cliffs. His journey was far from over, and the bond he had formed with his mysterious savior would guide him in ways he had yet to understand. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm light over the island, Ethan rose to his feet. The challenges ahead were unknown, but one thing was certain: the boy who had been saved by a whale would never be the same again. The first night on the island was both a blessing and a curse. Ethan was no longer at the mercy of the ocean's fury, but the eerie silence of the land was its own kind of torment. The island seemed lifeless, its rocky terrain barren under the pale glow of the moon. A biting wind howled through the cliffs, sending shivers down his spine as he huddled beneath the remnants of the raft for shelter. He had managed to scavenge a few broken planks and ropes, tying them together into a crude lean-to. Hunger clawed at his stomach, and his throat was parched from hours of drinking nothing but salty seawater. Exhaustion weighed on him, but every creak of the wind or crackle of unseen movement kept him wide awake. As the hours stretched on, Ethan's eyes began to droop. His body, too drained to resist, surrendered to sleep, but his slumber was restless, haunted by dreams of dark waters and piercing whale songs. Then a sound jolted him awake. It was faint at first, a soft splashing that could have easily been dismissed as waves against the shore. But as Ethan sat up, his heart thundering in his chest, the sound grew louder, more deliberate. Something, or someone, was moving through the water. Cautiously, he crept toward the edge of the beach. The moonlight reflected off the calm surface of the sea, casting a silvery glow over the shallows. At first, he saw nothing. But then, just beyond the surf, a dark shape emerged, breaking the stillness of the water. Ethan froze. It was the whale. Its massive form glided effortlessly toward the shore, its movements slow and deliberate. Ethan's breath caught as he watched the creature approach. But something was different now. The whale wasn't alone. Nestled against its broad back was a bundle, a strange, glistening object that shimmered like liquid silver under the moonlight. As the whale reached the shallows, it tilted its body, sliding the bundle gently onto the sand. Ethan's heart raced as he stepped closer, his bare feet sinking into the cold, wet ground. The bundle wasn't just an object, it was alive. A soft, mewling sound filled the air, high-pitched and plaintive. Ethan's eyes widened as the bundle shifted, revealing a small, fragile creature. It was a seal pup, its fur slick with seawater, its round eyes blinking up at him with a mix of curiosity and fear. The boy stared in disbelief. Why had the whale brought the pup here? What did it mean? The whale let out a low, melodic call, its gaze fixed on Ethan. There was an unspoken message in its eyes, a silent plea that the boy couldn't quite understand, but felt deep in his soul. I don't know what to do," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. The whale responded with another call, softer this time, almost reassuring. It nudged the pup gently with its nose, as if urging Ethan to act. Taking a deep breath, Ethan crouched down and reached out toward the tiny creature. The pup flinched at first, its small body trembling, but Ethan's gentle touch seemed to calm it. He lifted the pup into his arms, its wet fur cold against his skin. "What now?" Ethan murmured, looking back at the whale. The creature remained still, its massive form illuminated by the moonlight. For a moment, Ethan felt as though he were standing before something ancient and wise, a guardian of the ocean that had chosen him for reasons he couldn't yet comprehend. As the pup nestled closer against him, Ethan realized that the whale wasn't just saving lives. It was building connections. It had brought him to safety, and now it was entrusting him with the life of another. The whale let out one final, mournful song before turning back toward the open sea. Ethan watched as its tail disappeared beneath the waves, leaving him alone. With the seal pup cradled in his arms, the boy stood there for a long time, the weight of his new responsibility sinking in. The island was still desolate, the challenges ahead still unknown. But as he gazed down at the tiny creature snuggled against him, Ethan felt a spark of determination ignite within him. He wasn't alone anymore. The whale had ensured that. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the pup wriggling beside him, its tiny nose sniffing the air. The sun bathed the island in a warm, golden light, and for the first time since the shipwreck, the boy felt a glimmer of hope. The whale had returned him to land and given him a companion. But its actions were shrouded in mystery, leaving Ethan with a single burning question. What would it do next? The island may have seemed tranquil in the golden light of morning, but Ethan quickly discovered it was anything but forgiving. Its rugged terrain and lack of resources presented a series of trials that would test his limits, and the fragile bond he was forming with his newfound companion, the seal pup. With his stomach growling incessantly, Ethan knew his first priority was finding food. The island's barren cliffs offered little in the way of sustenance. Rocks jutted sharply into the sky, and shallow tide pools dotted the shore, shimmering in the sun. As Ethan inspected them, he noticed small crabs and clusters of seaweed clinging to the stones. The seal pup, whom Ethan had instinctively started calling Ripple, trailed after him, its big, curious eyes following his every move. Ripple's plaintive cries tugged at Ethan's heart, a constant reminder of the pup's dependence on him. "Don't worry," Ethan murmured, crouching by a tide pool. "I'll figure something out." He used a jagged piece of driftwood to pry a crab from its hiding place, careful to avoid its snapping claws. The catch was small and meager, but it was something. Ethan offered it to Ripple, who sniffed it hesitantly before nibbling at the edges. The sight filled Ethan with a fleeting sense of accomplishment, but the island wasn't done testing them. The next challenge came as a sudden, searing pain. While exploring a shallow lagoon, Ethan's foot brushed against a hidden stingray buried in the sand. The creature lashed out defensively, its barbs slicing into his ankle. He cried out, collapsing onto the sand as pain radiated up his leg. Ripple barked in alarm, circling him anxiously. Ethan bit down on his lip, his vision blurring with tears. He had to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help. Okay, he panted, gripping his throbbing ankle. Just breathe. He remembered a survival tip he'd once read. Venom needed to be neutralized with heat. The problem was there was no fire, no stove, just him and the unforgiving elements. Crawling painfully to a nearby tide pool, Ethan submerged his foot in the warm, shallow water, hoping the sun-heated liquid would ease the sting. Ripple sat beside him, its wet nose nudging his hand as if to say, "You're not alone." The next few hours were grueling. Ethan's ankles swelled, making every step a laborious effort. He fashioned a makeshift crutch from a sturdy branch, leaning heavily on it as he hobbled across the uneven terrain. Ripple stayed by his side, never straying far. That night, hunger gnawed at Ethan's insides, and his injured ankle throbbed incessantly. As he lay beneath his lean-to, Ripple curled up against him, its small body radiating warmth. Despite the pain, Ethan felt a flicker of gratitude. In this desolate place, they had each other. But the island's harshness wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. A few days later, Ethan stumbled upon a decaying piece of driftwood, half buried in the sand. Carved into its surface were the faint remnants of a name: Riley. His breath hitched as memories of his sister flooded back. She had always been the braver one, the one who teased him for being cautious. The thought of her safe at home, likely, thinking him lost forever, was almost too much to bear. Tears welled in his eyes as he clutched the driftwood, his chest heaving with sobs. Ripple approached cautiously, its soft cries breaking through Ethan's grief. The pup nuzzled his arm, its warm, wet nose bringing him back to the present. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, stroking Ripple's sleek fur. "I'll get us through this. I promise." The days blurred together as Ethan and Ripple faced one challenge after another. Finding fresh water became a daily ordeal. Ethan discovered a small stream trickling down from the cliffs, its clear water a precious lifeline. He used empty shells to collect it, careful to ration every drop. Their bond deepened as they relied on each other for survival. Ripple proved to be more than just a companion. The pup became a source of comfort and even ingenuity. One afternoon, as Ethan struggled to pry open a stubborn clam, Ripple used its small but sharp teeth to crack the shell. "Smart little guy," Ethan said with a faint smile, his voice tinged with admiration. Yet their greatest challenge loomed on the horizon. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Ethan noticed storm clouds gathering in the distance. The air grew heavy, and the ocean's waves began to swell ominously. Panic tightened in Ethan's chest. He remembered all too well the storm that had led to his shipwreck. If another tempest struck, their fragile shelter wouldn't stand a chance. "We need to move," he said urgently, scooping Ripple into his arms. Using every ounce of strength, Ethan climbed toward the island's cliffs, searching for higher ground. The ascent was treacherous, his injured ankle protesting with every step. Wind whipped through his hair, and the first drops of rain splattered against his face. Lightning split the sky as they reached a small alcove carved into the cliffside. Ethan collapsed inside, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Ripple snuggled against him, trembling with fear. As the storm raged outside, Ethan held Ripple close, whispering soothing words to the terrified pup. The wind howled like a vengeful spirit, and the rain lashed against the rocks, but the alcove held firm. In that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Despite the pain, the fear, and the endless trials, he wasn't just surviving. He was learning to endure. Ripple wasn't just a helpless creature. The pup was a reminder of resilience, trust, and the unbreakable bond between life forms, even in the face of adversity. As the storm began to subside, Ethan looked out at the horizon, where the first light of dawn was breaking through the clouds. The ocean, once a raging monster, now shimmered with a fragile calm. "We made it," Ethan whispered, his voice filled with awe and gratitude. "We actually made it." Ripple let out a small, triumphant bark, its wide eyes reflecting the golden sunrise. Ethan chuckled softly, the sound carrying a rare note of hope. The island was still a place of challenges, but Ethan and Ripple were no longer just boy and pup. They were a team. And together, they could face whatever came next. The first rays of dawn kissed the island's rugged coastline, casting long shadows over the rocky shore. Ethan awoke to Ripple nudging his arm, the seal pup's round eyes filled with urgency. It wasn't the usual plea for food or companionship. This was different. Ripple's cries were sharp, insistent, as though the pup was warning him. "What's wrong, buddy?" Ethan asked groggily, sitting up. Then he heard it. A low rumble, distant but growing louder with each passing second. Scrambling to his feet, Ethan limped out of their makeshift shelter. His heart sank as he saw the ocean retreating unnaturally far from the shore. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. A tsunami. The earthquake must have occurred miles away, but its ripple effect was heading straight for them. Panic surged through Ethan. The island's low-lying areas would be swallowed whole. They needed to get to higher ground, fast. "Come on, Ripple!" he shouted, grabbing the pup and sprinting as fast as his injured ankle would allow. The climb to the cliffs was grueling, the ground beneath him unstable from the storm's aftermath. Ethan's lungs burned and his ankle throbbed with every step, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Ripple clung tightly to his shirt, its tiny claws digging into the fabric. The roar of the approaching wave grew deafening. Ethan dared a glance. over his shoulder and saw the monstrous wall of water, towering and merciless, racing toward the island. Just a little further. He gasped, forcing himself to move faster. Reaching the top of the cliff, Ethan collapsed onto the rocky surface, cradling Ripple in his arms. He turned to watch as the tsunami crashed against the island, swallowing everything in its path. The ferocity of the wave was breathtaking, a raw display of nature's power. For a moment, there was only the sound of the ocean's wrath and Ethan's ragged breathing. Then, as the water began to recede, he realized they weren't safe yet. The tsunami had reshaped the island, cutting off access to the stream and displacing the little food they'd managed to gather. Despair threatened to consume Ethan, but Ripple's determined bark snapped him out of it. The pup stood at the edge of the cliff, staring intently at the horizon. "What is it?" Ethan asked, crawling to Ripple's side. Then he saw it, a faint glimmer on the water, too regular to be a natural formation. Squinting, Ethan realized it was the outline of a boat. Relief and disbelief washed over him. "A boat! They might be looking for survivors!" Ethan scrambled to find something to signal the vessel. His voice was hoarse from shouting, and his arms ached as he waved a piece of driftwood frantically. But the boat didn't seem to notice. It was moving too quickly, and the distance was too great. Desperation clawed at Ethan. "They're going to miss us," he whispered, his voice cracking. Ripple barked again, this time more urgently. The pup darted to the edge of the cliff and dove into the water below. "Ripple, no!" Ethan shouted, fear gripping his chest, but Ripple didn't hesitate. The pup swam toward the boat with surprising speed, its sleek body cutting through the waves. Ethan watched in awe and terror as Ripple approached the vessel, barking and leaping from the water to draw attention. It worked. The boat slowed, its crew peering over the edge to investigate the commotion. Ripple continued barking, leading the vessel closer to the island. Ethan's heart pounded as the boat finally reached the shore. A man in a weathered uniform stepped out, his eyes widening as he spotted Ethan. "Are you all right?" the man called out. "I've been stranded here for days," Ethan said, his voice trembling with relief. "The seal Ripple saved me." As the crew helped Ethan onto the boat, he looked back at Ripple, who had returned to the shore. The pup sat on the sand, watching him with those soulful eyes. Ethan's chest tightened. "I can't leave without him." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. "It's a wild animal," one of them said. "No," Ethan replied firmly, "he's my friend." Reluctantly, the crew allowed Ripple to board. The pup hopped onto the deck, shaking off seawater and barking happily. The boat set sail, leaving the island behind. Ethan leaned against the railing, his hand resting on Ripple's head. But the twists weren't over yet. As they sailed toward civilization, one of the crew members approached Ethan with a somber expression. "There's something you should know," he said. Ethan's stomach churned. "What is it?" The man hesitated. "We're not just a rescue crew. We're part of a marine conservation team. That seal, your friend, belongs to a protected species. We need to return him to the wild." Ethan's heart sank. "You can't take him from me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ripple barked softly, nuzzling Ethan's hand, as if sensing his distress. "I owe him my life," Ethan said, his eyes filling with tears. "He's not just a seal. He's my family." The crewman's expression softened. "We'll make sure he's safe. That's all we can promise." When they reached the mainland, Ethan was given a few moments to say goodbye. Kneeling by Ripple's side, he whispered, "You saved me, buddy. I'll never forget you." Ripple licked Ethan's face, his big eyes brimming with trust and affection. As the conservation team led Ripple away, Ethan watched until the pup disappeared from view. Months later, Ethan stood on a rocky shore, gazing out at the ocean. In his hand was a photograph of Ripple, taken by one of the crew members. He smiled faintly, his heart aching but full of gratitude. The bond they'd shared was unforgettable, and though their paths had diverged, Ethan knew Ripple would always be a part of him. And then, just as he turned to leave, he heard it, a familiar bark echoing over the waves. Spinning around, he saw a sleek, grey figure leaping joyfully through the water. Ripple had found him again, tears streaming down his face. Ethan laughed, his voice carrying over the ocean. "I missed you too, buddy." In that moment, Ethan realized that some bonds could never be broken, no matter the distance or time. The ocean had tested them, separated them, but it had also brought them back together. Ripple's joyful barks were a promise, a reminder that sometimes love transcends even the wildest of storms. The horizon was painted in hues of amber and crimson as the sun set over the quiet bay. Ethan stood barefoot on the soft sand, the cool waves lapping at his feet. Ripple swam close to the shore, his sleek body gliding effortlessly through the water. The seal's playful bark echoed in the stillness, a sound that now felt as natural as Ethan's own heartbeat. Months had passed since their fateful reunion, and the world felt different now, brighter, fuller. Ethan had always believed that survival on the island was the ultimate test, but it was the bond with Ripple that had truly changed him. He knelt by the water's edge, letting the gentle tide soak the cuffs of his jeans. Ripple came closer, his round eyes sparkling with trust and affection. Ethan reached out, and Ripple nuzzled his hand, a small but profound gesture that spoke volumes of their unbreakable connection. "You taught me so much," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, over the soft crash of the waves, about resilience, trust, and love. Ripple tilted his head, as if he understood every word. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to the island, the relentless storms, the gnawing hunger, the fear of never being found. Through it all, Ripple had been his constant, his savior, and his companion. The pup hadn't just saved him physically, he had saved Ethan's spirit. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, vast and mysterious, a reminder of the challenges they had faced together. But instead of fear, Ethan now felt a deep sense of respect for its power. It was the ocean that had brought them together, tested their limits, and ultimately forged their bond. As twilight deepened, a cool breeze swept across the shore, carrying with it the salty scent of the sea. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. The days on the island had been grueling, but they had also been transformative. He was no longer the man who had clung to the wreckage of a shattered ship, lost and afraid. Ripple barked again, snapping Ethan out of his reverie. The seal leapt out of the water, his movements graceful and joyful. Ethan laughed, the sound carrying over the waves. "You're right," he said, smiling. "No more looking back, only forward." As the stars began to dot the darkening sky, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace. Ripple's presence reminded him that even in the face of unimaginable odds, hope could emerge. The seal had shown him that survival wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about finding meaning in the struggle and cherishing the connections that made life worth living. Ethan rose to his feet, brushing the sand from his hands. Ripple swam in lazy circles, occasionally glancing back at him as if to say, "Come on, the adventure isn't over yet." He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the shimmering expanse of the ocean. The world was vast, unpredictable, and filled with challenges. But it was also beautiful, brimming with moments of connection and wonder. "Thank you, Ripple," he said softly, his voice carried by the gentle breeze. As if in response, Ripple dove into the water, his sleek body cutting through the waves like an arrow. Ethan watched him go, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt whole. The trials he had faced had left scars, but they had also given him a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. Ripple wasn't just a companion. He was a symbol of resilience, trust, and the enduring power of love. The moon rose high above the ocean, casting a silvery glow over the waves. Ethan turned and began to walk along the shore, his footprints disappearing with each step as the tide rolled in. Ripple followed, his playful barks echoing in the stillness, and as they moved forward together, man and seal, survivor and savior, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The world was wide, their journey far from over, but wherever it led, they would face it together. Some bonds, forged in the crucible of adversity, were unbreakable, and in the quiet embrace of the night, Ethan and Ripple's story became a testament to the enduring magic of friendship, the resilience of the human spirit, and the boundless love that could be found in the most unexpected of places. As the waves whispered their eternal song, Ethan smiled, his heart as vast and infinite as the ocean before him.